Here we are, live from Marfa. Welcome everybody to Marfa, Texas. I am here for the first round with the Day Zero crew. First 3 projects that were launched on Art Blocks.
Was this your idea, the Day Zero?
What do you mean?
This is the first time that anyone's brought together Day Zero as a panel. Right? This is pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, I think it's that.
We'd never been together to talk about this.
First time?
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, good job.
Okay, yeah. This is the first thing I thought of. So I don't know. Maybe I should do this as a full-time job or something. I don't know. Okay, let's do some introductions. So to my right, we have DCA, who with its project Genesis. We have to my left, Eric Snowfro with Chromie Squiggle. And we have Jeff Davis with Construction Token. First 3 projects that launched on Art Blocks almost 4 years ago coming up, right?
Was it on the 17th, right? Maybe was it the 17th?
17th, right?
27th.
27th. Yeah. It was the end of the month. So coming up in, a little over 10 days now, 4 years since that moment. And I wanted to start out just like, I know you've talked a lot about, you've all talked a lot about kind of those. I'd actually like to hear more. I think you've talked a lot about it.
I talk a lot.
Exactly. But I'd like to hear like more from Daniel and Jeff, because I don't think they're asked as much about like those days leading up to it.
I always enjoy hearing what they say.
Yeah. So curious, maybe start with you, like Daniel, like how did you, how did you get it roped into this craziness?
Well, that goes way back. That's like years, right? Yeah.
That's a couple of years before Art Blocks. But no, I mean, actually, Art Blocks was the beginning of it. Just a few years before it launched, Eric had this meeting at a bar with me and a couple of friends, and he kind of told us about this idea he had, these tokens and this art thing, and he said, "I'm calling it Art Blocks."
What year was this at?
This was like 2017 or so. And I remember we had notebooks out, we were taking notes, and like I was looking at like the other people in the meeting, we're like, I have no freaking clue what the hell this means, but it sounds really cool, and like art is involved, and we're gonna do this cool thing. And it was just like really it was like a really cool, surreal sort of like idea that it was just like so ahead of its time, and we didn't really fully understand it. I don't think even Eric understood it fully at the time, but like it was like the beginning of the idea that like things could be done with Ethereum. And I think this was like, I don't even know if like NFTs were a thing at that point. There's like,
well, you obviously were early in the CryptoPunks community, and that's kind of where you started a lot of this idea. Like you kind of came, and also like some of those other early generative projects. Is CryptoKitties, or which one was it?
I was deep into CryptoKitties. Yeah, deep into punks, deep into glyphs. Yeah, I kind of went a little ham on all of those. But those just got to this more validation for these things.
Yeah.
And I think, I've said this before, but Danny had an email address, Danny@artblocks.io. Pete and Matthew had an email address at artblocks.io in 2017, which is
wow. I know that. I don't think people realize that this wasn't something you put together, like a week before the launch. It wasn't something you worked on for 6 months before the launch.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Like 20 people in the Discord.
That's the thing that's just like, I don't think people realize that, or it's not, enough with, it seems like, now because the space has obviously grown and there's more demand. It's like people, at the max work on things for like a couple months, maybe a year. You're over here 3 years before even launching this.
There was a white
project.
There was a white paper too, right?
Yeah, it was a white paper, and Danny helped me with the graphics of the white paper, and I integrated some projection mapping stuff into it, and Danny added the QR code. It wasn't even on Ethereum at first. The very first idea, it was going to be its own blockchain with a token called DART, Decentralized Art Tokens. And you would send the tokens to a smart contract, and that smart contract would essentially change the art based on you sending the tokens, based on your ownership. Right. And then it migrated to Ethereum in late 2017, 2018, it started getting real about it.
I remember that. Yeah, and there was
And Salty Dog would come over, and Danny and Salty Dog would come over to my parents' house, and we'd meet there every now and then, and I would basically like bend Danny's ear for the whole time, and I could sense Mara, my wife, and his wife kind of just being like, okay, not again.
as soon as like the word blockchain was mentioned, like everybody would roll their eyes and be like, okay, they're gonna talk about this for like an hour or two. There's no getting through to them. But yeah, that was a cool time.
And Daniel, you, as I know, you've been on my podcast before, and you were kind of the artist of the family between you two, like, and you were doing studying art and all these things like that, and then it's kind of amazing that and that kind of had an influence on you, right, in the beginning, as far as seeing him studying art and doing art. And I'm curious just how that like relationship, and as far as brothers go, like how it evolved. Like, were you thinking of him like when you were making this originally, and like planning to have him have a project, that type of thing?
Okay, there's a lot of layers there. First of all, Danny created Genesis because I was at a point of knowing how to code that was completely like zero, and Danny was doing a lot of stuff with processing. And so I said, Danny, I need something that's going to show the variability of the blockchain. And he actually created it before I started creating the Chromie Squiggle. I created the Chromie Squiggle because I wanted to contribute my own kind of variation to the blockchain. I don't know that Art Blocks would exist if it wasn't for Danny kind of putting up with a lot of those conversations, because there was some validation every now and then. I feel like I was talking a lot, and then every now and then we'd kind of have this breakthrough moment where we'd both be like, yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, Danny was there from the start. He built the first piece. We were all in my living room, where, I don't know if you remember, Danny, where we I connected his piece to Art Blocks and put it on the TV. And I was like, and every time the Ethereum blockchain hashes, it updated the artwork. Yep. It was so, not exciting to air.
It was very primitive. It was so primitive.
But to you guys, it was like everything at that moment.
And to me, I just remember being like, holy, like this is actually working. And he was able to capture the essence of variability with a script with like multiple different layers of variability, the background, the color,
in the generative, like what was the generative? Because like now I feel like 4 years later, at least in this space, we take this long form thing for granted, right? Like it's now, but that was kind of strange, right? Like it wasn't how generative art was being done before that, right? That wasn't your process. You weren't, not doing anything like that, right?
No, I don't think we were thinking in additions. At least not me personally.
Yeah.
For me, it was exciting just to see like a use for this like random art generation. I always explain it like this. It's about these like hash strings, and these hash strings are these little packets of condensed random energy, and these algorithms are like breaking apart these packets and releasing all this energy, like as this explosion of randomness in art and like imagery on a screen. And for me, like that's what the exciting thing was, is like Eric is like taking these, he's providing these hash strings that we can use in algorithms, and that's where the excitement was. I never really thought about like the like the additioning of it, or like the tokenizing and releasing it as like a set edition. And maybe that's not the case for everybody, but at least the excitement was about randomness and like creating art that really touches on that, like generative
and controlling that randomness, which we all know is great. Jeff, I want to talk about it to you, because I think you have an interesting perspective, being a professor, like in being kind of in art academia, and you kind of maybe just tell me how you got brought into this. And usually academia is thought of as not the most like cutting edge of what's going on, right? Yeah. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of always, I guess my entire life, I've always had sort of a profession, and then I've been an artist, and they've been sort of somewhat distinct things from each other. And so, yeah, I was in higher education for 20 years, but then I sort of, in weekends and at night, I was a practicing artist, And so, yeah, I think my kind of exploration into blockchain just was, kind of unrelated. I wasn't teaching digital art. It's just I was teaching normal basic color theory and design fundamentals and things that are just core things regardless of how you study art. But I had got into NFTs in early 2019. I discovered Super Rare and Known Origin. And it just sort of, I didn't know anything about blockchain and that actually wasn't particularly interesting to me. It was just this idea like it's a digital marketplace and you can keep your artwork in a digital format. And I had been doing generative work for about 10 years or so at that point. And the final step in my process was to create prints out of the work that I was doing. So I would create algorithms to create prints, which then I would put in exhibition spaces as, kind of the materialization of my art. And so this idea of I can stop before I make the prints and that digital thing can be the work of art. And so when I was working on Super Rare, for instance, it's a one-of-one platform. So I'm a generative artist working on a one-of-one platform. So I would run an algorithm, create an output, and then one by one, mint them to the blockchain and then create a series of individual pieces over time, maxing out whatever limits there were for allowing artist uploads. You could only do a certain amount a week, so you weren't just spamming the system. But it worked, and I got some traction, and I got some interest in what I was doing. And I think that's Eric. I didn't know Eric. I didn't know any of this stuff that was happening from 2017. But I think he discovered my work through that and just reached out to me via email and was like, hey, I'm working on this thing called Art Blocks for generative artists. Explain the kind of concept of it. Here's the Discord. Why don't you join? And I actually was like, I don't know what Discord is. You could just keep emailing me.
Sometimes I was like, dude, the email's fine. This is fine. But eventually you're going to have to come in. Scary. But then you made gradients, and I was like, ooh, this guy makes gradients. I like gradients.
And so, but what he had described to me was like, I had been, I think, sort of craving that conceptually from the work I was doing on Super. Like, in my mind, I was like, there has to be a better way that you could put the algorithm online and let people come to it and take down the outputs versus me choosing outputs and doing it in a limited fashion. That it just made sense to me that there would be a way to do that. And he basically pitched that to me. I was like, oh yeah, no, this is like the art vending machine that I was kind of like had in my mind. He was telling me he was building it. And so I was like, yeah, I'm down. So this was like September 2020, and I started working on Construction Token, and Eric was very generous to help me with some of, like, I'd never been on testnet before. He helped me with some of the hooking into the hash string to use that for randomness.
Versus it was processing is what you were doing.
And I was doing straight processing. It wasn't even P5 yet. I didn't know what P5 was.
It was a pay it forward because Danny translated my original 3JS script into processing to even make it in the original version of Art Blocks. So I felt like there was a little bit of...
Yeah. And so it readied the project. And then basically, we kind of had it queued up and Eric was readying the platform. And then my recollection kind of is basically we launched on the morning of Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving on 2020. And I basically remember like getting an email in the middle of the night, Thanksgiving night, kind of like, Jeff, we're going live tomorrow morning. Mints are going to be on sale, half price for Black Friday. So we're going to mark them down. So you need to be up at whatever, 10 to like unpause your project.
Yes.
And I was like, kind of woke up. I didn't see it. I found it the next morning. It was like, when I woke up, I was like, okay. I just kind of meandered in my office and got ready.
Yeah. And what was all your expectations like on that day? Like, like
0. I mean, we had done testnet and people had enjoyed it on testnet, but and I think it helped people understand it better by doing it on testnet. But there was this moment where, and I get to talk about this every now and then about like, there's this, lately I've been talking about it a lot, this like extractometer that we all kind of are in Web3. Like, at some points you're selling something, no matter how good it is, you're extracting, and sometimes you're adding to the community. And I never had pictured it that way until later. But there was this moment where I launched it, and I didn't have the guts to go into the CryptoPunks Discord and be like, hey guys, look at my project. Like this is not in my nature. But a lot of the punks did. And they're like, hey, this guy that's been here for a long time, check it out. And it was kind of as punks were starting to go up in popularity and people were they were still pretty cheap. And so the people that I had been sharing the idea of the project with for, at this point, years, and DMs and Discord, all rallied around it. It's like, go check out this project. So in the first day, his sold out and his sold out. And absolutely zero expectation of that happening. In fact, I think funny story with Danny, it's like, I do think I eventually got to a point where I drove Danny crazy enough about Art Blocks to where I was like, hey, Danny, I'm just going to launch yours for you. Because I think I just kind of gotten him like over this cliff. And I did not expect that they would sell out that quickly. So I was like, let me just handle it for you. And notoriously, I forgot to mint 0 to him. In fact, I didn't think about mint 0 at the time. I didn't think that was that big of a thing. I minted my own mint 0 because I had to test it.
Yeah.
So I opened up Art Blocks and mint 0 was minted by someone else. But then, Danny, I was like, I remember texting Danny and being like, hey, Danny, check out your Ethereum wallet. Because I didn't know how else to explain my excitement.
Yeah.
And I knew that he was going to look at it and be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. I was like, what in the world?
I was like, get in Discord. People want to know who you are. They want to like talk to you. They're like excited about this thing.
And I remember, so I was in the Discord and we quickly on the fly, like separated it out into channels for each project, and then was kind of in there and just kind of like so exciting. Everybody was just like giddy. But I had, I have Zerion installed on my phone, which is just kind of an aggregator of just blockchain. And so it was, had my wallet assigned to it. And it gives you a notification anytime there's a transaction to your wallet. And so there were 500, that day. So I was just sitting here, like my phone is just going bing, 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 like all day for like 2 hours straight. I was like, what? And it was the same sort of thing, like, what the hell is going on? It was just like, I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. And then, I think, and then you obviously had no idea what would be to come with this. And it just kind of went crazy. And then, slowly, like I was there I wasn't there a couple of months after that. I came into the Discord and I remember even then it was still felt like, way different than it did later. I guess my question is that, now we're 4 years later, I'd like to just like maybe segue into kind of maybe talking about the future a little bit and, kind of gone through this like roller coaster ride, I think a lot of the people that are still here, still coming to Marfa, still part of this community are really completely still focused on the art. And I think have in their heart kind of what you all had when you started this, right? Of making this not necessarily, you didn't, like you said, you didn't think it was going to make money. You didn't think it was going to like, you just wanted to put this into the world because you thought that the world would be better having a platform like this that allows for art to get out there. The world needs more art, right? So, what do you think, where are we going like with this? What do you think is the next 4 years of Art Blocks Plus?
Okay, that's tough to ask. 4 years is a long time. But, okay, there's a couple of things. People entered Art Blocks for a variety of reasons, and every single one of them is perfectly valid and welcome, right? Yeah. Of the people that entered Art Blocks for the variety of reasons, we are still here, and we are still building, and we're still thinking about it, and we're still, like, enjoying each other's company, each other's art. And I think we sometimes take for granted the fact that we still know each other by name, and I feel like we take for granted just how much through highs and lows this community is stuck together. And so I don't know, when I think about the future, it's like, there's a lot of shiny objects in Web3. We try not to follow those. We try to stick to our integrity, stick to our values. I'm biased. I think that Art Blocks is not as a platform, but as an entire ecosystem and environment. If you look around at the people, you look around at the collectors, you look around at the institutional conversations that are happening, you look around at the artists, and you look around at like the passion behind it, not the, maybe we don't ship as fast as other platforms, but like the true passion behind this. I do think Art Blocks is the best place to make generative art. And I think it's the most, just the most beautiful environment, like overall environment, because it's not just about the minting mechanics, although it's always nice to have new minting mechanics. Yeah, not just about Marfa, although, gosh, like this really brings people together. It's the authenticity of the artists that came and started stuff and did stuff early at Art Blocks, It's the authenticity of like why Art Blocks exists, and it's the authenticity of the collectors like you that came in before there was millions of dollars to be made. And of course, there's plenty of collectors that came after the millions of dollars that we made that are fully authentic. But there was this moment where it was just beautiful, and nobody had any expectations. And to me, that today remains in the culture. And I think that's the most important thing, because you can't fabricate that. We can try to fabricate that, but you just can't. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of where we're going. And I think whatever we do, we're going to do it a little bit more calm, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more value driven, but we're going to do it, and we're going to do it the best that we possibly can, and hopefully continue to be the home for the best generative art from the best generative artists in the world. So anyways, I've a lot to say there, but I think that's what the next 4 years are going to be. And that's all I care about, is that we are the best place to release generative art.
Yeah. And that's, for me, like coming at this as, you know, an artist my entire career and life, that's what's always been so excited to me about. I always come at Art Blocks with a lens of an artist, basically. And so, you know, why I wanted to join Eric and help build Art Blocks was to create these opportunities for the artists who were working in ways that were similar to the way that I was working, and had felt like I'd been working in relative obscurity for 20 years up to this point. And this it was such a natural fit for blockchain, generative algorithms, bring them together to create one-of-a-kind NFTs. It was just it's such a lightning in a bottle, you know, kind of thing that makes so much sense. And so just being able to like continue to shepherd this movement, this medium, support the artists that are working with us. And that's what's super exciting to me. That's been my sort of like North Star, is like, this is making careers for artists. It's getting recognition for these artists in wider art contexts in the contemporary art world. And that's so satisfying for me. So
That's awesome. What about you? What do you think?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, one thing for certain is that, like the rise of this genre, I guess the use of blockchain to be able to do this with generative art, I think it really opened a lot of eyes, and it's drawn a lot of artists into the space that maybe didn't have a place for their work. And, you know, it takes a long time for artists to develop a vocabulary, like let's say like working with randomness or working with generative ideas. It takes them a while to build up that visual vocabulary with coding, and over time, you know, I think we've yet to see like how incredible of an art form this is. You know, how far people can really push it, and you know, and we have seen incredible art, but like it's just the beginning of what people are doing. You know,
on that note, like, you know, I think we'll probably wrap soon and let you guys get back to, you know, the party. But one question I want to know on that note is that, you know, I still think, you know, the amount of people that actually own NFTs is still staggeringly small, you know, that collect any of our art, you know, any of these artists here, you know, it's pretty small. What do you think it's fine if, like, you know, maybe that's the thing? And then, you know, two, I guess my question is like, if the answer is we do want to grow, you know, the amount of collectors of blockchain based art, how do we do that? Like, how do we start to think about that? How do we scale this to getting more and more people collecting this type of art and actually enjoying it, you know?
I think we're going to scale the number of people that are collecting digital art.
Yeah.
Period. And it's just going to so happen to be that if you are going to collect a digital art piece and it doesn't have NFT technology built into the provenance and the authenticity, then it will be very deflating to receive an artwork in that fashion. Yeah. Because we have this beautiful technology that actually does all that. And then the idea that we store it all on chain in Art Blocks, and that, you know, it's resolution agnostic and it's more future proof, that's just like a really nice cherry on top. But it's not for every artist, because not every artist is going to build with code, and that's okay. I think that there's a future where this is mainstream and commonplace, but it's this thinking of like, you know, I don't actually understand. Well, I do maybe, but some people don't understand how an engine works, but they get in a car every day and they drive. And yeah, I think that is when we're going to scale.
Yes.
And we have to talk about the technology now. We have to have a group of nerds around the technology, because we have to figure it out. We're like literally eyes closed, like bumping into walls, trying to figure out what that future is going to be.
Yes.
And yes, we're going to have cyclical successes and low points, but for this to be sustainable for artists, it's for it to be sustainable for platforms, we have to scale beyond the technology.
Yes, and the the people that are not here are not going to be able to remember their seed phrase and figure out how to secure that and all this type of things. They're just if you're expecting that, then we're going to fail, right?
Yeah. So we have opportunities to facilitate not digital object ownership, like as an NFT, because that's hard for people to process, but just take it a scale back and understand, like, most humans on the planet don't understand the idea of owning something digital, period. Like, it's just not something they've ever processed. And when they can start processing that without having to understand what MetaMask is, it's going to be explosive for those things. But we're so far away from that. And, we're Danny and I are working together at Generative Goods, trying to come up with ideas of making this thing mainstream and commonplace. Jeff is doing awesome things with Davis Editions now, getting things into people's hands without them having to understand what that means. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, to where it's just going to be niche to talk about the technology, just like it's niche for me to go to Cars and Coffee on Sunday and talk to people about the horsepower in a car.
Yeah.
Most people don't care. They're going to drive by and be like, damn it, I have to wait in line at the coffee place because these car nerds are like taking up the coffee, right? Like, it's the same thing. We're going to be niche talking about the technology, and everyone else is just going to be using it without knowing it. And I give that 5 years.
Exactly. I think that's 100%. And I think that type of thing is also going to unlock, I think, the true power of generative art, which is scale, and I think that, at least me personally, what is that? Abundance. Yeah. Like, to me, like, personally, I know I've talked to you before about this, and like, I am like, top end of the market. I'm excited about that. Institutions, museums, great. But what gets me excited, is actually making things cheaper, like, and making it, huge editions and things like that, because I just see a world where there's no reason that everyday people that are going and collecting art, they have to go to a store and buy, and they buy a piece of art, and there's a million of that same piece of art, and like, generative art allows us to keep costs down, but still have a one of one, like, that's something that no other art form really can provide, I think. And at least when I think of and dream of the future, I think of like,
you're doing a lot in that realm, and I've always had a lot of respect for your like willingness to kind of explore abundance. Another abundance-driven artist is Jack Butcher. I think he's doing a tremendous job of recognizing that you can have art, and then you can have it be abundant, and it can still be meaningful. It can still be special. There's a lot of people that are kind of thinking, and that doesn't mean that that's the only way to think.
No, not at all.
A lot of us, like, we're just excited to have our stuff into people's hands. Yeah, exactly. It just feels good, and so an abundant amount of color studies. It's amazing.
I know. Like, it's awesome. Well, thank you all very much for kicking this off. It's been an amazing chat, and we'll do this again sometime. But here's to 4 more years and infinity and beyond this. Thank you for having me on your platform. Thank you for allowing me to sit down. So thanks, and thanks to everybody at home. We'll be back soon with another artist. I'll figure out somebody else. But all right,
cheers.
Bye. Take care.